Thanks for coming in. Welcome to the Friday edition of Ceramics. So before we get going today, it's that time of the week where I need to get some recycled clay recycled. And I don't think if we talked about this, or if we have, it's been a while. So I'm going to show you something here. Sandy, thanks for coming in. This bucket here, there's a bunch of water in there. You can see the clay. There's like multiple kinds of clay in here even. There's some B mix, some old Joe's red. So you need a bucket like that, like a 5-gallon bucket or something around that size. And then basically when you're done with your clay session for the day, you put the clay into the bucket and you want there to be enough water in there to cover the clay. And you want to have a cover for that too, because leaves will land in there and bugs and shit. And then as you start to get closer to the end of your bag, you'll probably have a kind of a collection of 5 or 6 pounds worth of clay in here. And this is how you go about recycling that. You're going to need an old shirt. That's what this is down here. I apologize for not being able to really set up the camera well for this. So this is an old shirt. And I do think old shirts seem to work pretty well for this. I've tried pillowcases, and it seems like pillowcases, like they don't breathe as well as old shirts do. And you want this fabric to breathe kind of so that the clay dries out as it's sitting in here. So I would say that the old shirt does seem to be a good fabric for this. You can try pillowcases though. Your results may vary. And I mean, you can get a couple uses out of this too. They do kind of start to get mucky, but it's not that big of a deal. So this is just a normal gardening shovel, gardening spade, whatever the hell that's called. Okay, so that's probably like, I don't know, a little bit less than 10 pounds of clay. The next thing you do is bring up the corners of the shirt like that. And then you can, I think I can get a little bit more in there. Hold on, I'm going to get one more scoop in there. I think I can get a little bit more in. Okay, I think I can get that amount in. So you're going to bring up the corners of your fabric like that. And now you need to hang this. So I'm going to turn the camera around. And you see the chair across the 5 feet away from me? So you'd be surprised. You can usually kind of wedge it into stuff like that. You know, as long as it doesn't weigh too much, it'll probably be held pretty well like that. So at this point, you're going to let that set for probably like 2 days. I'll be right back. I'm going to cover my bucket. So as you can see, that bucket, I don't really have a, yeah, that was a t-shirt. I don't have a lid for that bucket. So I just put something on top of it. It would be good if you have like a 5-gallon bucket with a lid, because the leaves from the trees and stuff like that, they get into the recycled clay and they can cause some problems. You can definitely get some weird kind of stuff because of that. So, but basically that hanging t-shirt with the ball of clay in it, you'd probably let that sit for 2, maybe even 3 days in this kind of cool weather. It'll probably take a little bit longer. So I think 2 or 3 days maybe. And after that amount of time, basically what I'm going to do, that clay will still be pretty soft, but I'm going to roll it out on my canvas, like 1 inch thick, maybe, like just like a big fat slab. And then you let that fat slab set up for like a couple hours. And at some point it stiffens up enough that you can start to wedge it. And then you make sure you thoroughly wedge it, get it all mixed up well. And yeah, so that's the process there for recycling clay. If you're doing this at home, it's not too bad. Once you have to wedge it, it's a little bit physically laborious because you know, you got like 10 pounds of that stuff and you're slamming it and cutting it and stuff. So it's not something that you have to do. If you want to buy more clay, that's fine. I think that's totally valid. But if you want to recycle it, that's how you go about that. Valerie, thanks for coming in. The other thing it's good for is if you're like mixing clay. Like I have a bunch of different kinds of clay, so I'm generally kind of just mixing them all together, and that allows me to get a kind of custom clay body, I guess. Not that it matters much, but yeah. All right, so I just wanted to kind of start with that because I needed to get some clay going. Today we're going to finish the creamer. Basically going to do some more sgraffito on it. And this one is for the Saturday class, so I need to get it a little bit more complete so that I can paint it with slip. So we're going to start with this one first, actually. So this little pitcher guy, you can see that seam there where the spout and the piece are joined. It needs to be reinforced. You can kind of see those not particularly healthy looking joints there. This piece is leather hard, so it's you know, I can touch the spout and it doesn't collapse on itself. The first thing I want to do here is all over the seam where the spout meets the body of the piece. Not really on the outside. The outside looks all right, but on the inside, I'm going to do the some scoring over that. The kind of like Frankenstein's monster kind of stitches that go over the seam. I'm using my X-Acto knife here. The clay is it's too stiff to use a fork, so you're going to have to score it with your needle tool or X-Acto knife. So like that. And then I'm going to roll out a coil and reinforce this now. And then we're going to put this handle on, which I made just before class. I didn't actually even check to see if it'll fit on the piece, but it'll probably be all right. Where's my clay? Where's did John Day need clay? So the coil, you're going to size the coil to basically whatever that gap is like. So more than likely, this coil is going to be pretty narrow, kind of wormy coilette territory. Oh, I almost forgot. Shit. There's like an arts and crafts sale going on this weekend. Georgiana sent me an email about it. Hold on. I'll send you guys the flyer after class with this link. I'm gonna look for the file and just see if I can remember. I think Patty's in it. Patty Yaki. If you took classes at CE Mesa. I don't think my computer can handle opening files. Oh, I don't have it saved anyway. Okay, well, I'll send you a link to the flyer after class. But I think it was this weekend. There's a arts and crafts fair in Talmadge, I think. So I'll send you, I'll get that in the email after class that I send out, okay? I promise. I forgot. Georgiana sent me that. Was it in this class that you guys were asking if Georgiana was going to keep doing emails? Because I contacted her asking if she was going to do that, and she never got back to me. So I don't know if she was her way of saying no. But she did send me a flyer for that the other day, and I forgot to get it out to you guys. So where the hell's my paintbrush at? Okay, so you got this wormy coil here. Sorry, I kind of got off topic there. In typical kind of fashion. I'm just going to put a good amount of slip on this little coil down here. This here little coil. I'm going to bring the computer a little bit closer too so I don't have to bend over. Come on. And, coils this small, once again, you don't really have to score them. But you do want to make sure they're nice and slippy. So I'm just kind of trying to direct that coil into the seam. It looks like it's there. And then we don't really need that extra stuff. Pressing that coil into that joint. Hopefully it'll stay in place. Okay, so put a little bit of slip on that. And the slip is, it's pretty useful. It kind of helps to lubricate the surface so that as I come back over it with my rib tool, the rib tool doesn't like stick to the coil and pull it out of the joint or anything. Not ideal like that. Connie, thanks for coming in. And you can also, this is somewhat optional, but you might find this useful. You can take your sponge, if it's a little bit damp, and you can fold it up, and you can even up the seam a little bit with this too, if you need to. Sorry, clearing my throat. And you can use your finger and kind of press that grog back into the surface. If you use the damp sponge, a lot of the times you'll find the grog will kind of be raised to the surface a bit. So it's a good idea to press that back in with your finger. And the inner seam now, where the spout meets the piece, should be pretty much invisible. It should look like it's one piece. I can see a little bit of a line down there. Let me see if I can. If you see there's like a little bit of a line or anything like that, just work it with your rib tool. If you need to put more coil into a spot, that's definitely something that happens. Something to be aware of. The seam where the dart was, if you've noticed that there's like a crack developing on the inside or anything like that, you may need to do some Frankenstein scoring and then put a coil in there. I'm just putting more slip in there because it looked like it had some little hairline kind of stuff going on. So I'll keep an eye on it, but I don't think it's cracking through as far as I can tell. It just needs to be massaged with slip, I think. Okay. Let's get this handle on here and then we'll move on. Okay, so the handle, I'm going to score this this area real good, and then I'm also going to score this area. Real good. And then the handle, you're going to score the corresponding areas on the handle. So you'll probably end up scoring down here. And then also up here. And then also right here. So this is the Saturday classes creamer. Basically, I just need to get this handle on so it can kind of set up, and hopefully I can then get a couple layers of slip on there before tonight. All right, so the handle is it's pretty stiff. There's a little bit of flex to it still, but it's, for the most part, it's pretty stiff. If your handle, if it has too much wetness, when you try to place it on your piece, the additional slip moisture and stuff like that will make the handle structurally unsound, and then it'll just kind of break and fall off the piece. Like, it'll look fine, you'll be happy with it, you'll leave for 5 minutes and come back, you'll take a nap in a hammock or something, you'll come back, and the handle will be just broken off next to it. And the reason that happens is if the handle's wet, that's just too much moisture, and it loses its structural integrity because of that. But this handle feels pretty stiff, so I'm not worried about that happening. In fact, if anything, this handle's maybe a little bit stiffer than what is ideal. And then I like to ponce some additional slip into those crevices. Ponce just means like stab with a brush. Okay. So this should be good. I can let this dry a little bit. And then I should be able to get some white slip on there for the class tomorrow. Some of that additional extra slip, I don't really need that, so I can sponge that away a little bit. What the hell? All right. Put this over here. Put this spat on it. At least on the part of it. Oh, God. Okay, so we're going to do some sgraffito on our creamer now. And we should probably do something that aesthetically looks nice with the sugar container. With these like surfboard symbols. Hang 10 or whatever. Christ. I've decided that I think the just the top part will be sgraffitoed. I'll leave this part red, so I didn't even paint it. But if I want to clean up these lines, these brush lines, I can rib the surface and get rid of that. Alternatively, you can just paint more carefully. That would probably be the best thing to do. But you can kind of see that it's not too bad. See how I kind of start here, how much more crisp that line looks there. And just take your time. It's not too bad. BJ, thanks for coming in. If there's some stubborn fogginess, you can probably rib that off if you just kind of carefully work it. You could use a damp sponge also. You have to be kind of careful though, because if that damp sponge, if it comes even close to the white, it'll get some red onto it and kind of stain it. So you got to be a little bit careful with that. But so that's line looks a lot more crisp now. Oh, there's still some shit there. Hold on. Some stuff. So crisp. And you'll see I started lining the inside with the white too, and I'm going to do that. It just needs a couple more coats. See how kind of streaky and shitty it looks. I think I got like 4 coats on this outside, and I got like 2 on the inside. The slip, it takes so long to dry, especially now that the weather's changed and it's a lot cooler outside. So it's I kind of have to make sacrifices to get stuff kind of done and a little bit dry in time. So, if I had painted the inside too, it basically would have made the clay too wet and I wouldn't have been able to get 4 coats on the outside. At least that's my story and I'm sticking to it. If you want to take the white off the side of the handle, you can do that too. Similar kind of process here. You want to be really careful whenever you apply, any sort of like force onto a handle like this. You're really playing with fire, as they say. And but don't play with this because you're playing with fire. Do 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 do. Well, you've got your handle. It's got some white slip on its side. Oh, thanks, BJ. Play with Fires. I mean, yeah, that's one of the best pre-70s Rolling Stone songs, easily. I mean, Under My Thumb is maybe a little bit better, but yeah, Play with Fire is stupendous. And I'm not a big harpsichord fan either, or whatever the hell that thing is in that song. Marianne Faithfull covered that too, or something. She's still alive, Marianne Faithfull. She died a couple years ago. I can't remember. So it took that white off the side there, kind of crisped it up a little bit. Looks a little bit more crisp. All right, let's do a little bit more sgraffito on this guy. Make some surfboard, radiating surfboard shapes, or whatever you want to call these. Make sure your hands are really clean. The red clay will stain the white clay. So clean your hands before you do this. I'm going to shift over here so I can carve this, and hopefully I can see it and you can see it too. I'm gonna send also. I'm gonna send you the flyer for the show, for the arts and crafts sale show thing, and then there's also a video from Ceramics Arts Daily, which it has like some additional sgraffito techniques in it. She uses like tracing paper and some other stuff, and kind of does more intricate kind of designs. So I'll send you a link to that. I basically am just not really there with sgraffito. You know, I'm okay at it. I generally understand the principle, but you know, I'll send you a link though to someone doing it super, super well. So these surfboard shapes. I mean, I don't think you have to do exactly what you did on your sugar jar, but you know, you probably are going to want to do something pretty similar to it, right? That way it looks like a set or a pair or whatever. A pair, I guess, would be the better word. A pair of ceramic objects that go together. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And you got to be really careful because the handle's on there, so it's easy to break the handle off and all sorts of stuff. Okay. I think I have mine. So using the little loop tools still. So if you're doing your sgraffito like nice and lightly, I mean, you can see you can cover up mistakes pretty well. Maybe like two little coats of slip like that, and you should be pretty good. It's a little bit tedious, but it is fairly forgiving. And something I probably didn't do enough of on the sugar guy was taking out areas of the color. So having more of the red clay there, it kind of helps to add contrast and help the form look a little bit more designed. Hmm. Well, yeah, I want to say a couple years ago that Mary Ann Faithful died. I think 4 or 5 years ago. The more I'm thinking about it, I feel like that's something that sounds like something that happened. You know, this is not horrible, but the way that like all of the shapes are kind of like the same size and stuff like that. I mean, it could be. You could add a little bit of variety there to kind of help your eyes move around the piece, but it could be worse. I tried to make them instead of surfboards. I tried to move them into more of like an owl kind of direction. Maybe not that top one. Yeah, just trying to see what it would be like if I put a little painted thing down there. Meh. The only thing about painted designs is that middle area is probably fine, but the outer areas I would need to go over again just to get them a little bit more substantial, because that white slip, the red clay can kind of overpower that if the white slip is not thick enough, from what I've have experienced sometimes. Yeah, I don't really think much of that shape. Don't think too much of that. I have to get maybe I have to get a slightly smaller brushes, and I can do some painting with the white slip on maybe the next project or something. But painting with the fan brush, you got to get like smaller brushes to do little designs, I think. Well, if you had the white thinner, it probably would. You could kind of do some little translucent looking things, I bet. But yeah, probably just a little bit thicker. Like it might look like a painterly kind of brush stroke on the wet clay, but once you fire it, probably it doesn't look that good. I'm gonna grab some coffee. I did find a better brush. So let's see, maybe just like a flower, kind of like that sort of thing. Just a crappy kind of little flower guy here. Oh yeah, there you go. Got some wet slip on there. Well, do little flower kind of things probably are relatively possible. Although, I don't know. That one's not too bad. This one, kind of crappy. It could be worse. Basically, just do a dot and then do a little flowery kind of petals around it. Maybe you could maybe try that a little bit thicker, BJ. That's not a bad idea, actually. I feel like the slip I have it's not thin, but maybe it could be just a touch thicker. You can kind of like do a little bit of a kind of mixture of techniques where you paint and then you score, or not score, but sgraffito a little bit around the paint. Get that crap out of there. There we go. Yeah, I mean, like on mine, I can kind of tell that it needs at least two coats here, because there's just so much red that kind of comes through the first coat of the white that it does seem like 2 is pretty necessary. Probably you could go thicker. The only thing is at some point you're going to start losing because the slip's going to be so thick, you're going to start losing the ability to kind of paint it on, you know what I mean? And I feel like, honestly, I don't think I'm too far off from that now because it is kind of thick, but yeah, maybe just like a little bit thicker. Something to mess with. So a little bit of sgraffito, a little bit of painting. That's what it's all about, the contrasting slip. You can get a lot of different surface decoration from that. You don't even have to start using glazes, you know? Just use the contrasting slips. Maybe put clear on the inside if you want to use something, but yeah, I mean it does seem like it needs 2 with my slip as thick as I have it. Surfboard, owl, flower. I'm going to go ahead and put a coat on the inside here while I'm sitting. Okay. So let these dry really slowly. Keep them in a bag for 48 to 72 hours. That way you can monitor them and check on them once a day. If there's a crack that develops, you can do the Frankenstein score thing over that. Put some slip on there, put a coil in there, smooth it together. But just give it a kind of slow dry period. And you should be all right. I'm going to set those aside now. Try to get another coat of white on the inside of that before today's over. And let this dry a little bit more and then get a coat of white on this too. Okay. I'm doing on time. Oh, lots of time. So the other thing that we're going to talk about today is stamps. Specifically, the kind of stamps that you can make from clay, and then you fire, and then you use them on wet clay. So these are dry right now, but theoretically you fire these and then you can use them. So you can do stuff like your initials. And you can do other things that are more kind of for texture. So we'll do the initials first, the lettering ones first, just because they're more complicated. They take longer. And you don't really have to do one of these. You could definitely keep carving your initials into the bottom of your piece. As long as you're getting your initials in there somehow. That's the most important thing. But, you might have a project where, maybe it's not even your initials. Maybe it's like lettering or something where you just you want to have some alphabet kind of related designs on your piece. There's two kind of main ways of going about this sort of thing. One technique is going to be to make this kind of stamp. You see how the letters are sticking out from the surface there? And the other technique is to make this kind of stamp, where you see how the letters and numbers are carved into the piece. The most notable difference between these two techniques is that this technique is much, much, much easier. Much easier. Not even close. It's like 15 times easier. But the problem with this technique is that you need to make basically two stamps, because you make this one, which is not really the stamp. This is like a negative for making the stamp. So you make this one, you fire it, and then you use it on wet clay. And then the wet clay ends up looking something like this. And then you fire this, and this becomes the stamp that you use on wet clay. So the main kind of thing about that is that it requires two firings. So if you don't have easy access to a kiln right now, which is probably the case, this technique is maybe preferable, even though it's way, way more difficult. Just the fact that you only have to make this and then fire it, and then it's usable, that makes this kind of good for our current situation. If you have access to a kiln, though, or if we get back to class sometime in the near future, this technique is totally viable. So these are dry enough that I can get away with using them. Although you really don't want to do this, it'll mess up the form. So like this one, for instance, so you use this one, you fire it, and then you use it on wet clay, and you get this, and then you fire this, and then this becomes the stamp. You have this shaped like this before you press it into it. This, that's kind of ignore how this is shaped. But you see how you get the raised letters. So it's important that these be carved with some width so that the letters will have enough shape there. Kind of pressed it a little bit too far into the clay, but You can see how that one is already usable. It already makes the initials kind of stamped and into the clay and stuff like that. There we go. So they're kind of fun. So these shapes, basically, I've just been starting with a block of clay, and then you can either, like a coil, kind of form it into that shape, or you can cut it into that shape, whatever, works for you. Try not to put air bubbles into this. That's probably the most important thing. And if you use fresh clay from the bag, you're going to be fine as far as like the thickness and stuff goes. You probably won't have to worry as long as you're under like an inch kind of thickness. Well, and even then you're probably fine if you're over that. But if you're using recycled clay, especially these thick chunks of clay, you're going to want to put some holes in them before you're totally done. That way the clay hopefully can reject the air from itself as it's firing. Disperse the air from itself. That's the word. That's the word. So I might start with something like that, and then use my paint mixing stick and kind of press it into a more square shape. This one is, I think this is a little bit bigger than an inch. It's shrinking, so maybe it's like exactly an inch now. Yeah. This one's like exactly an inch across. This one's a little bit smaller. They do shrink when they dry a little bit. Like this one's like 7/8, it looks like. I will say the slightly bigger one is much easier to carve. Once you get down to a certain size, it gets pretty hard to carve this stuff. Especially if you're using like Old Joe's red clay like I am, or Bruce's, or like a groggy kind of clay. The groggy clays, they just don't really like you to do these little fine carvings and angles and stuff like that. They kind of reject you if you do that. You'll notice like you'll be carving and like a chunk of grog will come out of the clay. And since you're doing something that's, very fine and small, that chunk of grog is actually, it's a big deal. So probably if you have access to a B mix or a fine grained clay like that, maybe think about using that instead. But it's probably not that big of a deal. Why the hell is this edge so rounded over like that? Let me see if I can true this up. Okay. So I kind of like these trapezoidal shapes, or whatever this would be called. I'm going to try to make a slightly smaller one this time. So we'll see if I can if I can get away with it. So this is 7/8. It looks like 7/8 by 7/8, a little bit under an inch. And you have to remember when it shrinks. So even though it's about the same size as this one now, this will shrink a little bit and it'll be a little bit smaller. And they shrink again if you fire them, of course. So that's kind of something else to think about is, you can make them a little bit bigger than what you want because when you fire them, they'll shrink. So if they seem kind of big, that's something to remember. So it's important that the face of the stamp be very flat before you start. So you got to make sure that it's totally flat. There's not like geography on the surface. And the first step, imagine there's no letters here. This is just like a plateau of raised clay. So the first thing you're going to do is set that up. And the way you do that, just a little bit within the edge, like a 1/16 of an inch, just a little bit. You're going to go ahead and use your X-Acto knife. Like that. And, try to keep this square or rectangle or whatever the shape is. And then you're going to come in from the side. And you should be able to remove those sections. So you're making like this plateau in the middle of this face here. And then you can, what's the best way to do this? You can use your paint mixing stick or, a straight edge like that, and you can kind of true up these edges too. Like this. So that's the first step, is making the plateau. And the second step is going to be planning out where the letters and the numbers go. So you can make a line like this. Letters, numbers. And you can, that top area where the letters are going to go, you can divide that in two, since you're probably going to use two letters to make your initials. Like that. So something that's important to keep in mind about these is you need to make the letters and the numbers backwards or mirrored or whatever. And that can be kind of hard to picture. So do it on paper first. Especially the numbers can be kind of hard. So, just make a square and then think about what a D looks like backwards and what a C looks like backwards. It's the white balance throwing that off. D and C are not too bad, so I'm kind of lucky in that on that front. Some letters are going to be harder than others, so that's just kind of how it rolls. I think it was like in 2019, I had done stamps 1 week for the demo. Yeah, I think it was 2019 because I put the 9 the wrong way. Yeah, so afterwards it looked like 2001p or something like that. It was like totally dumb looking. So yeah, I think numbers especially can be kind of weird. Okay, so I know I need to put the D into this this block here. And the way you're going to start your shapes is basically just try to remove little bits of the clay from around the shape of the letter. So like a D, for instance, like it can have a flat edge over here, but the rounded part of the D, I can start removing clay. So I can take this clay out here. See that little triangle, and I can do that down here too, and slowly form my D. The inner areas, the clay is a lot harder to remove. So you just gotta be really careful. It might not come out as like one solid chunk. See how like this lower area, there's a little bit of boogeriness down there on the floor of that area. That's all right. That's kind of to be expected. You're going to need a toothpick, and basically you just pounce that stuff down and make it flat. But you can see already how it's starting to come together there. Like I said, I'm really lucky because D and C are fairly easy letters. really it's the numbers that are the harder part for my specific situation. But an X-Acto knife, a toothpick, it's pretty much all you need. Some spare paper just to plan. The inside of shapes, these like, for D, that like half circle on the inside of the D, or like O, like the various letters that have shapes on the inside, you don't really have to remove that. You could just do the line, and then you could probably use a toothpick or something and make that line a little bit wider if you want to. And that would probably be enough. Like, you don't have to remove that whole shape on the inside there. Like, if you get that line cleaned up, that would probably be all right. But you can take that shape out if you are willing to give that a shot. So you can kind of see that the X-Acto knife is very necessary for this. Probably dental tools, those like little stabby kind of tools that come in some of the toolkits that you can buy on Amazon. Some of those like expanded toolkits, they have like extra little stabby tools in there. Stuff like that would probably be good. If you have a dry brush too, those could be useful, because you can use the dry brush to knock away boogers and stuff, knock away little grog boogers. And yeah, just gotta be patient with these. You gotta be willing to spend some time with them. I mean, you figure this is the sort of thing that if you're putting the year on here, this will last you a year. So you could make a lot of stuff that has this stamp on it. And if you're not putting the year on here, I mean, you could keep using this into perpetuity. So you do want to spend some time on this stamp. Make sure it looks, exactly the way you want it to and stuff. Yeah. All right. So the C also, it's pretty much a lot like the D. Just focus on removing those corners of the square and getting it into a more circular kind of shape first. So the C, you can kind of like take out that Pac-Man kind of middle thing there. And then I like to put a little bit of moisture on my finger and just kind of massage the surface of the letters. And that'll kind of help to clean up the edges a little bit. Although usually what you have to do now is a little bit of additional edge cleanup. But the wetness, it does seem to kind of help a touch. So you gotta come back over that. Okay. So what I want to do now is this bottom area where the numbers are going to go, I'm going to divide that into 4 rectangle things. Oh man, this is going to be not easy. I'm going to do 3 rectangles, and then since it's 2021, the one can go into a smaller sized rectangle, I think. This doesn't have to be like, what's it called? Like typewriter fonts where like every letter is the same width or whatever. This doesn't have to be like that. Like Courier, isn't Courier like that? So maybe I can do something like this here. See, that's like 2, 0, 2, and then the 1 can be in a much smaller rectangle. Because the two 2s and the 0 are going to be super difficult to carve at this scale. Yeah, this is like 1/8 of an inch. Christ. Like I said, a little bit bigger. It does make these a lot easier to carve. Just a little bit bigger. Dun, 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 dun. Okay, so you do the same thing. The 2 and the 2 and the 1 have to be backwards. I guess 0 and 1, it doesn't really matter. They're not really. They don't really have the kind of frontwards, backwards thing going on, do they? But the 2s definitely do. Taking out that little corner there. And, as much as possible, just always try to, when you're doing this, just try to focus on taking out the kind of triangular sections that you can take out to start with. So you see that triangular section there? That's what I'm going to start with. Just like with the D and the C, how I took the triangle off the edge of the square shape to get it to look more circular. Just kind of basically slowly work your way towards the shape like that. So you see how taking that triangle out, it already starts to look like it might become a 2. Might. Keyword might. It looks like a 7 if from like a 70s kind of magazine. So keep in mind, this is less than an inch. This is a little bit less than an inch across. This little square I'm working on here, a little bit less than an inch. I would say that this is like on the edge of like doableness. If you go much smaller than that, it's probably going to be, it might kind of start venturing into the territory of not doable. But I think I think we're still there. I think we can still do this. I wish I hadn't drank any coffee before class, because every little shake of my hand is like a little miniature Holocaust almost. I probably should have said that. So you see how that starts to a little bit get looking like a 2. But this is a good time to go ahead and make a 2021 stamp if you're into putting the years on your piece. I know I definitely am into doing the initial and year kind of signature. Because a lot of times with clay, it can be hard to date stuff. I mean, it's not too bad right now. Like whenever I see anything that's mid-fire glaze nowadays, I can pretty much date it pretty quickly, just because you know what that looks like. But some of this stuff, especially if you don't use like the glazes, it can start to look pretty timeless. And I don't mean that in the like, oh, it's a timeless wonder. I mean that in the kind of like it's really difficult to date kind of meaning of the word. Like this sort of thing, for instance, if I fired this and then put just like clear on the inside or something, and then it would be just impossible to date it. Like red clay with white slip on it, that would be just impossible. Now, if I used like stone denim or something like that on there, it'd be like, yeah, of course, it looks like 2014, big time. But that's just something to think about, is the ability to date your pieces. The clay lasts forever, and a lot of people are going to have a hard time dating them unless you tell them when it was made. You got to help them out a little bit. Okay, let's see if we can get this 0 going next. Crap. My hand shook the wrong direction. We'll see. I think we can fix this. Took a little bit more out of the O than I wanted to. Oh, come on. All right, let's see if we can make another 2 that looks somewhat like the other 2. God damn it. Ugh. Come on, you rat. Kind of slowly getting it there. Slowly but surely. I mean, I'm just, thanking God that it's not 2030 or something, because threes are going to be extremely difficult to carve. I feel like if there's anything, the lesson of 2s is that 3s are going to be even harder. I think on video that looks all right, but in person, all the little groggy bits and stuff are a lot more apparent. So I gotta try to clean this stuff up. Whenever I blow on it, I'm just desperately trying to blow the boogery stuff out. So just like the letters, kind of giving it a little bit of damp surface treatment. Yeah, but you got to do that extra loop in there, BJ. I think it's going to be bad. Keep your fingers crossed that an asteroid slams into the planet before 2023. So those numbers, I think especially, they still need a little bit of cleanup, but you can kind of see how that's starting to get there, right? Like I said, this is kind of small, so this is maybe just borderline possible at this size, under an inch like this. But you go a little bit bigger than this, like more on this kind of range, this scale here. This one's, it's a lot more doable. Just like that extra quarter of an inch, it really helps. I didn't mention this when I started this, but this clay is a little bit stiff. If your clay is totally fresh, probably what you want to do is make the shape first and then let it set for like half an hour before you start making the plateau and carving the letters and stuff. This is just recycled clay, so it has a little bit of stiffness already. So I was able to kind of get going on it right off the bat like that. But yeah, basically that, cleaning up little corners and stuff now with whatever little picks or X-Acto knives or whatever you got. And yeah, I mean, take your time with these. This can last you a whole year, or like I said, if you don't put the year, it can last you forever. Yeah. Yeah, this is not fresh anywhere close. Anywhere close to fresh. And if you're worried about the thickness on these, like I said, if you're using groggy clay like the Old Joe's or Bruce's or various other stoneware kind of clays, as long as you're under an inch, you're probably going to be fine. But if you really want to cross your T's and dot your I's, just go ahead and give this some holes. You can use your needle tool or a toothpick or whatever and give it some holes up in the thick area. This way, hopefully, if there's any air pockets or anything like that, they can be diffused in the kiln without any sort of blow up. Oh yeah, I mean you could do 2 separate stamps for sure. Yeah, that's definitely a possibility. Yeah, I don't see any reason that wouldn't be just as good, especially for some of these small kind of things. That might be especially something good to think about. You can see on this one, the holes are on the underside here because this is like a thick kind of mound. So the other kind of stamp to think about here is these mushroom kind of looking stamps. And the whole points of doing the mushroom kind of stamps is that sometimes, if you're doing like a sculpture, maybe with like a lizard or a fish or something, and you need to get that texture on the surface. The problem with a stamp like these is that each time you press the stamp in, you have a kind of very clear stamp kind of look. Like you can kind of tell. So the way you avoid that is by giving your stamp this rounded mushroom looking top. And so when you apply this stamp, you rather than stamping it, you kind of like roll it onto the surface. And in fact, there's even like texture balls that I've seen people make. So it's just like a ball that they'll kind of roll around the surface. But you can kind of see the rounded quality of that stamp. It allows me to cover an area like that, and you can't really tell where the stamp begins or ends. And this particular texture, it's pretty good for making like scale looking things, I would say. Kind of looks like a fake lizard skin or something. Here's a slightly different version. This one's kind of just more abstract and funky. So kind of same deal. You want to start with pretty much the same kind of chunk of clay. And make it into a tapered form or like a mushroom looking thing. And all these stamps you could do like double-sided and stuff. Like instead of just a mushroom, you could have also a ball on this side, kind of like a dumbbell looking shape. And you could put a texture on both ends. That's totally doable. I just haven't really been doing that, so I'm not going to start. So just kind of carefully making my mushroom shape here, trying not to make air bubbles, etc. So I'm going to try to get this circular first. And then to make it more mushroom-like, just place it face down like that, and then kind of rock it around circularly. I'll be right back. So something that might be fun to try with these, if you have one of these like screwdrivers where you can end off and change it with like a bunch of different ends like that, probably a lot of those could be cool. The one I showed you that made the lizard kind of looking texture, the scale, that's just the end of a paintbrush. Like just dotted all over this to make it kind of look like a golf ball. Bum, 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 bum. Bum, 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 bum. Anyone remember Mark Dameron? Remember Mark Dameron? All those little tools, all those little tool ends he was using all the time. So you got these. What is this called? A hex bit? Is that what this thing is? Whatever this thing's called. Torx bit? I don't know. And you want to make sure you take this all the way to the edge of your mushroom cap or whatever the hell these would be called. So yeah, these are once again, the screwdrivers where you can take the end off and change it out with like all the various kind of ends. Very cool tools. I'm gonna try one with the this like Fat Phillips, whatever that's called. It's like a box. Is that what it is? Box Phillips or whatever. When they do that. And then the blocky one I did. This was the back of my plastic fork. Yeah, I think that could be an interesting shape, right? The little six-sided star guy. This one is just the back of my fork. Something else you could think about doing, you could, if you have like little chunks of wood in a hot glue gun, you could do like hot glue little spirals or something on the chunk of wood, and then you could use the hot glue like a stamp. You know what I mean? And like at school, we had the PVC tubes that had the hot glue or silicone or whatever that was on there. Very similar kind of idea. I think that shape is called a hex bit, I think, BJ. If you if that's something you're interested in trying to pick up for yourself, I think that's what that's called. I could be wrong though. Hex bit, something like that. Okay. Don't really need that. Okay. Oh yeah, there you go. So make yourself a little mushroom. I haven't really had to worry about this, but if your mushroom has like a bunch of surface stuff on it before you put your thing in it, like if it has a bunch of cracks and stuff, you're gonna want to make sure that you smooth those out, because those textures will they'll mark on your piece also, so you will get you won't get a very true stamp if there's like a bunch of extra cracks and stuff on there. So that's just something to keep in mind. Although, I mean, I really haven't had to worry about that today. So, I mean, I think that only if you're using like really excessively wet clay or excessively dry clay, probably would that happen. Let's see. What else could you use? I don't know what else you could use, but I'm sure there's just a billion things sitting around the house that could be used like this for some pretty cool texture things. So, or like at a thrift store or something, weird stuff like that. A lot of weird stuff you could use for some fun textures. So unfortunately, we got to let these dry before we test them. Well, and even then, I mean, you really want these to be fired before you use them. If you use them dry, I mean, you can use them a couple times, but you're going to get some, like the wet clay will get stuck to them, or stuff it won't look as good. And then this type of mushroom texture guy, you can put some holes like this, kind of try to get them into that area, since that's the kind of thickness area there. Kind of go in like that, and then you ought to be fine. some little holes like that. So hopefully if there's any air bubbles or anything, you're not going to experience blow-ups. So we do have class next week. I think earlier in the week I had said I thought next week was Thanksgiving, and we don't have any class Thanksgiving week. But I was totally wrong as usual. And we do have class next week. It's not Thanksgiving. So, you get those requests in for next week. And then we'll do whatever you guys want to do. I'm totally down. The week after that, Thanksgiving week, probably what I'll do, I don't know if I'll do it every day, but I'll probably just kind of do like office hour kind of stuff. So I'll have like Zoom going, but I'll just be working on whatever I want to work on. But you can still come into the meeting and ask me questions or whatever you want to do. But that's 2 weeks from now, so we don't really have to worry about that at this point. I mean, probably mostly what I'll be doing is stripping wood and cutting wood because I have a lot of wood I need to strip and cut, unfortunately. That streaky first coat, you just got to let it dry now and then get a couple more coats on there. It'll slowly look better. I need a wider brush for the handle, but not this wide. Like a inch thick wide brush, maybe. I don't know. Goofy looking crap. And like I said, the inside of this one, it needs like 2 more coats of white slip. Kind of optional. You don't have to line the inside of these with the white. I just think mostly it's for an aesthetic kind of reason. I think it'll look better. But it's definitely not required. If anyone has any questions about this stuff, get those in the next minute or two. Because I'll probably be wrapping this up. Well, guys, I appreciate you coming in this semester. We're covering a lot of ground, looking at a lot of stuff. Dominic, you want the slip to be dry. so not tacky anymore. Um, so typically I'll put this like in front of a fan on low, and I'll put it so that the handle is facing away from the fan, so the fan is coming this way. Just because I don't want the handle to get just blasted. But it takes like 30 minutes between layers, even with a fan on it. The slip dries really slow, and you want it to basically get dry enough that it's not tacky. If it's tacky and you start putting another coat on, you'll probably scrape some of that first coat off, so it's not going to build up well. And you're going to be looking at like four coats, probably 4 or 5, a handful of coats. If you get 3 on there and it seems like it's thick enough, then you don't necessarily have to keep going. But it seems like I've had to get like 4 or 5 coats on there when I've done this. Yeah, that's all right. The first coat is especially because of how the slip sits on the piece. The first coat's going to be very uneven. Like you can kind of see how streaky that is. Just let that dry. The second coat, go horizontally instead of vertically, and that'll help to even that out. Now this slip, because I've kind of scraped the sides of the jar and mixed some of that stuff in, there's like little chunks in there now. But if it's freshly blended, you shouldn't have little chunks. Yours should be pretty smooth. You shouldn't have to worry about chunks or anything like that. But yeah, just, alternate layers. So horizontal, then vertical. The unevenness should be fine after like 2 or 3. Yeah, definitely, Melissa. If you have white slip and you want to do some coloration in there, some colors are going to be better than others for that. Like those expensive colors, I don't know that I would use them. I mean, you could maybe give it a shot if you want to, but especially like blue, green, especially medium green and dark green, blue, darker greens. The black can be interesting because you can get like gray. Yeah, for sure, Melissa. Yeah. The B mix will be good. The black underglaze can be interesting because you can do like a grayscale kind of thing. What else? But those like colors like the bright red and the bright orange and the bright yellow, those ones that are like $50 a jar or whatever, I don't know that I would do that with those. You could maybe give the cheap yellow. You know what I mean? There's like a cheap yellow and a cheap orange. I think they still make those. Maybe you could try those. But definitely blue, green, black, brown. So Dominic, after you get your 4th layer on there, you're going to let that slip also dry so it's not tacky anymore. And then you can start sgraffitoing. Hopefully your piece will be in the leather hard range of stiffness. Like mid leather hard to even advanced leather hard is all right. But hopefully it's somewhere in there by the time that 4th layer dries. You can keep sgraffitoing as the piece dries. So even if it gets to like past leather hard into the greenware stage, you can still sgraffito. It's just that you'll notice if you're taking red clay with it, it'll start to get a little bit chippy as it gets too dry. But the clay, it doesn't really dry too much when you're painting the slip on it, since it's absorbing some liquid from the slip and stuff like that. Yeah, definitely. Keep on keeping it in plastic and stuff like that. After you're like, let's say you get like 2 layers of slip on and you're not going to be able to get another one on tonight, go ahead and put it in a bag. And then, tomorrow you can do another 2 layers. And like, let's say you get half of your sgraffito done. That's okay. Just keep it in a bag. It's going to be really hard to re-wet the piece once you've started doing the sgraffito, because you get that red wet and that red touches the white at all and it's going to stain it. So you're going to have a really hard time if you need to re-wet the piece. But yeah. So I'm gonna get you guys a link to a really nice Graffito demo, and also the Arts and Crafts Fair that I think is this weekend. I think I saw on that flyer, so I'll get that to you. I don't know if they're. I wonder if they're still doing it, because aren't they doing some sort of Corona stuff or something like that? Well, I'll get you the flyer, and you can find out yourself. Well, guys, I'm going to go ahead and wrap it up, I guess. Once again, I really appreciate you guys coming in, sticking with it, doing what you can do. Send me your requests for next week, okay? Have a good weekend.